Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome and thanks for logging on. We are waking up with watches. Everything you see morning of is in stock and for sale. Reach out to me, Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing. I have all the answers. We buy what we sell what we buy. We love to add inventory. So if you wish to sell us a watch or an entire collection, we pay cash, we pay fast, we walk you through the process, we make it a no-brainer, and no upper limit on value paid. We will buy your entire collection of Patek Philippe 5016s. If you've got one in every precious metal, we will buy all of them with cash. We can also trade a watch, often offering better value on a trade than an outright sale. So if you've got a watch you're not wearing, trade it to us for one you'll love. To buy, trade, or sell, reach out to me, T Mosso at thewatchbox.com. Jumping straight in, here's a watch that was originally launched in 2013, redesigned for 2022. You're looking at the second generation Omega Speedmaster 57. Now, there are many vintage reissue style Speedmasters, so this is by no means a heritage piece or a re-edition. What it is a modern Speedmaster that's designed to nod and wink at the 1957 original CK2915. Now, it's smaller and thinner than the original 2013 Speedmaster 57. First, it's a millimeter thinner, so 40.5 millimeters in diameter in steel. It's only 13.3 millimeters thick for an important reason. The newest version features a manual wind rather than the original automatic. It has a lovely green dial, sunburst metallic. We have those vintage style twin registers, even though it is a triple register chronograph. You can see how we have chronograph hours and minutes superimposed over each other at 3 o'clock. Vintage style alpha hands for the sub-registers and a vintage inflected broad arrow hour hand. We'll fire everything here just to make sure that the watch is running so I can demonstrate some of the chrono features. The watch has applique indices, which are an upscale modern look you wouldn't have seen on a vintage timepiece, and it is quite well loomed, so you're going to have no trouble in that regard. The watch features a column wheel and vertical clutch for chronograph operation. The column wheel can actually be seen through a skeletonization in the bridge on the back. It is a very sharp and positive feeling. With the vertical clutch, there's no jump or stagger when you start the chronograph, and if you wish to leave the chrono running full time, not a problem. No additional wear and tear to the watch. We got a giant cambered sapphire that's designed to look like a vintage plexi and a vintage-inspired dot over 90 metal tachymeter. We have a 60-hour power reserve with twin mainspring barrels, master chronometer certification, so it's everything the COSC is, but it's also more. Tested for chronometric precision, fully assembled in 6 positions, power reserve, shock resistance, tested to over 15,000 Gauss magnetic field strength. Basically an amagnetic watch, and verified as a 50-meter water-resistant timepiece. Now, you can move the hour hand independently if you're traveling, even driving the date forward and backwards if you cross the international date line. You're not stopping the chrono, you're not stopping the movement, you're not displacing the minute hand. Now, if you do want to move everything and stop the movement, there is a hacking seconds function. On the reverse side, you can see Arabesque Geneva across the bridges. This is now a manual wind movement, this caliber, which is derived from the 9900 as the 9906. Anti-magnetic, shock-resistant, chronometer certified, very tough, very precise with a coaxial escapement. Here's a new feature on Omega watches. Let me try to get a little bit closer with my zoom here. You have a incremental single step in or out micro adjustment. So this is effectively Omega's answer to Rolex's long-running Easy Link, and we have many individual removable links in the bracelets. You're going to get a great fit. I'll show it to you on the wrist because this is a smaller, thinner Speedmaster 57 than the original iteration, which was maybe a little bit too blockish for its own good for a vintage inflected watch. You can wear this watch on a wrist down to 14 centimeters circumference. You'll have no problem at all. That said, if you have a smaller wrist, sometimes neo-vintage is the way to go. What is neo-vintage? Well, it's what we call watches from the 1990s and the 2000s these days. Watches that are discontinued and very different from current production by their respective brands, but still new enough that they can be used the way they were intended, especially if they were sports watches. Now, in 1996, Vacheron designers Vincent Kaufman, who was working for Vacheron, and Dino Modolo, well-known freelancer, drew on Jörg Heisig's 1977 reference 222 sports watch, and in 96 they created the first generation Overseas, the only Overseas to be chronometer certified and the thinnest up until the launch of the ultra-thin models of the third generation. So this is the first generation 42040, 8.6 millimeters thick, 48 millimeters from the lug-to-lug across the case. It's a 37mm watch, but it wears larger. Now, this was one of the very last of the Sigma dial Swiss watches. These a priori marks, as they're known, that's the abbreviation for the Swiss Precious Metals Trade Organization, that incorporated this logo into Swiss dials during the 1970s. Now, it was voluntary by the manufacturers, but they were asked to incorporate that Sigma-like logo when the dials minimally featured hands and indices made of gold. And here they are made of white gold to resist tarnishing or oxidation over time. This is not one of the earliest examples, so it features a luminova rather than a tritium dial. And you can see it has an anthracite metallic sunburst with a Girard-Perregaux 3100 base, adjusted and finished by Vacheron. This is the only Vacheron ever to be chronometer certified in the overseas line. The chronometer certified overseas was a first generation only deal, and then only for the automatic, not for the chronograph. So this has a number of features you can't get even on the third generation, such as that chronometer certification, but the current overseas self-winding still doesn't have hacking seconds, whereas this first generation model does. It has the most intricate and laboriously finished bracelet of any generation of the overseas. So we have two different locks. One is this clamshell, and then the other is this system that allows you to move a switch. You can see closed and open. You move it back and forth, and it locks and unlocks the clasp, so very secure. The case is still 150 meters water resistant, despite being quite slim. Automatic winding, because it is a GP 3100. It's got a 46-hour power reserve. You can see the ship, the famed overseas ship, inspired by the Italian naval training vessel Amerigo Vespucci. And then on the wrist, it wears wonderfully. This would be the overseas automatic that I'd want to own. Remember, Vacheron, for its first 250 years, was mostly not a manufacturer. It was an établisseur, taking the best parts and assembling them to its own designs. And that's what this is. This is a watch of extraordinary quality, intricately finished, laboriously manufactured, and exactingly adjusted. This is a great example of what Vacheron does so well. My favorite feature is that vaulted Vacheron logo that arcs across the top of the dial. What a watch. And you can see how compact it is. A guy could wear this, a gal could wear this, both would love it. Sticking with Vacheron for a moment, we talk about neo-vintage. Here's something that probably reads a little bit more vintage, even though it's actually of the same era. This is Vacheron, a complete calendar, weekly calendar, moon phase, a reference 47052. This was launched in 1994 in yellow gold. It's 36 millimeters in diameter. It features a dial that incorporates a French language complete calendar moon phase, and then it's a semainier. It is a little radially arrayed weekday calendar. So you could see the months en français as well as the days, and then there is this little lunette indicator that indicates the current week of the year. There is some subtle yellow gold applied cabochon for the hours, and then a sort of vertical vague pattern or a vertical wave. Maybe we could describe it as a tapestry guilloche that runs from top to bottom. This is an old school watch, welded lug construction, handmade, hand finished, 36 millimeters in diameter. It's a beautifully traditional Vacheron dress complication with a Jaeger-LeCoultre base caliber. And you can see on the reverse side the pre-1995 hallmarks. This would have been one of the earliest examples made. On the wrist, it is beautiful, and it does look like a vintage watch. But again, this model only came out 2 years before this, so they're not really separated by all that much. This is a rare watch. It's unusual to see it anywhere, and it wears nice and compact. If you want a traditionally beautiful dress watch, but you don't want to deal with the provenance and condition issues that often dog watches from the 30s, 40s, and the 50s, this is a great way to get into what Vacheron has historically done best, while still being new enough that the condition and the authenticity and the parts originality are beyond reproach. And of course, because it is a JLC base, it's got a high horology automatic base for a high horology watch. Really cool. 47052 reference. In 2016, Patek Philippe replaced its old 5130 world time with the 5230. Initially, the 5131 cloisonné enamel world time continued in the catalog, but when it lapsed, we were greeted with the 5231, and this is the 5231J, the yellow gold cloisonné enamel world time that came out in 2019. Now, it's got a smaller case than the previous 5131. This is 38.5. The previous model was 39.5. And this doesn't have a crown guard structure, so it looks considerably more compact even. It does have strong lug profiles. You can see there's a bevel on the lugs. They're curved. They have a stepped out profile when viewed in the case band context. We have a dial that incorporates the Louis Cotier world time system, which over time was also evolved by Patek Philippe. At center, we have cloisonné enamel. This is performed by applying up to 20 different layers of glass-based paint. Now, the cloisons, or the gold wires, are shaped by hand to create the image of the land masses, and then the vitreous paint, the enamel, is applied on a solid gold dial base. Different weights of one color can be used to create shading, and different colors can be used to create color transitions. So remember, it's not just the cloison, it's not just the different colors. Different weights of, for example, blue create the shading around the land masses where you have those continental shelves and the shallows. So it's a very nuanced type of execution. Very laborious, very time consuming. Only a few people can do this to a Patek Philippe standard, and it's done in-house at Patek. Now, the Louis Cotier world time system includes an inner counterclockwise rotating 24-hour reference ring, and then you have these 24 reference cities that represent the 24 principal time zones of the world. So you can see right now, it is 5 p.m. in Moscow. I know that because I'm reading 5 at center. Moscow is my reference city. You set your reference city up at 12 o'clock, and then that little ring next to it says 17. So I know I'm looking at 5 p.m., not 5 a.m. And it works the same way all the way around. In Mexico, it's 8 a.m. In Auckland, you could see that it is 2 a.m. In the Azores, you could see that it is 1 p.m. Very simple, self-explanatory. And if I want to change my reference time, let's say I want to go to Tokyo from Moscow, I'll put Tokyo up at the top. Now the watch does all of the math for me. And if you want to see how that reference ring moves, you can set it independently of the city. It moves counterclockwise as the hands move clockwise. Flip it all over, caliber 240 HU heure universelle. That is the universal time version of the 240 micro rotor. The space movement's been around since 1977, but it's always appeared in premier watches. Generally, Patek reserves the micro rotors for the more upscale automatics and complications, and this watch definitely qualifies, being both a complication and an application piece. Back when it was new, you had to apply and be approved to buy it. So micro rotor automatic, 22 karat rotor, ceramic bearings, 21.6 beat rate, 48-hour power reserve, 6-position adjusted, free-sprung gyromax balance, anti-magnetic Spiromax silicone hairspring, a high grade of finish, which you could see, that's kind of self-evident here, and then it's accurate to -3 + 2 seconds per day. Full matching yellow gold deployant clasp. We'll throw it on my wrist, get a sense of how it fits and feels. It's more compact, both in terms of how it fits and how it looks compared to the old 5131. The 5231's a lot more wearable. You can see that well down the barrel and even from over the top. Let's talk about something that's a lot more attainable than a Patek application piece. From 1992 through 2002, the initial Bell&Ross watches were made by Zinn of Frankfurt, and the Space 1 and Space 2 chronographs were co-branded Zinn for Bell&Ross. The Space 3, featured here, launched in the late 90s, now bearing only Bell&Ross's brand. This is a rare example in titanium with original tritium dial and a full factory bracelet. Now, it's a 41mm watch, and it's designed to read like a monoblock. It looks a lot like the old IWC Porsche design chronographs in that there's something halfway organic and halfway mechanical about the way it looks. It looks like a stone that's been smoothed in a stream. It's a 41mm watch, though if you measure lug to lug, it's really compact. It's only about 43.5mm lug to lug. You could see the T-crown, which is what that crown is called, and the chronograph pushers are recessed into the case band. The way this works is you liberate the crown, and then it pops out, just like that. You screw it out. The watch is 200 meters water resistant. Now I can set this watch. I can also use the quick set for the date. And if I want to set the second time zone, I use a little pusher adjuster over at, let's call that 745 on the dial. The watch, as manufactured, monoblock case. So you can see that the bezel and the case are one piece. Everything loads through the back. And the original water resistance for this watch would have been 200 meters. So let's pop open the clamshell style buckle. You can easily see this is a Zen design there. And then take a look at the case back. You have the Bell&Ross ampersand, you have the 200 meter notation, and then you can see better how the T-crown and the pushers work. And this is a Lemania 5100 base that has been modified to function as the GMT you see right here. So it's a cam lateral clutch chronograph, automatic winding with a 48-hour power reserve and a 4 Hz beat rate, is a very tough and reliable tractor caliber. Matte black dial, anti-glare with a few well-chosen orange accents. This watch is an absolute blast to wear on the wrist, as like the Vacherons you saw earlier, this falls into the category of neo-vintage, a 1990s watch that is now approaching the threshold of what would traditionally be called a vintage watch. And you can see just how short it is, being under 44 millimeters across the wrist lug to lug, a 41 millimeter watch, and thick to be sure, but super compact and all in titanium, very light to wear. You can see inside the clasp we have a few different degrees of adjustment. You can move the anchoring point to fine-tune the fit. These are rare and highly sought, and you can see this one has a beautiful real tritium patina on its dial. That's not photina, that is the real thing right there, folks. One of the most accessible watches that I'm going to show you today, and also one of the coolest. In 2018, Urban Jurgenson, built in Switzerland but of Danish origin, launched the watch you see right here. This is the Urban Jurgenson reference 2140 in white gold. We have a white gold case that is made in low volume with traditional welded-on lugs. And if you get really close, you can see that these sharp breaks between lug and case have been achieved by welding the two together and then removing all of the gathered material from the weld to create a super sharp seam between lug and case. You can't do that with machining, you can't do that with stamping. This is a low volume case construction at its best. The dial features one-piece hand-formed white gold hands and then a one-piece sterling silver dial that's been cut on straight line and rose lathes. So you've got a basket weave for the small seconds, a sort of dental pattern outboard flanking the minute track, and then a vogue or a wave pattern, maybe a quai de poisson or fish scale over the center. So white gold handmade case, white gold handmade hands and indices, sterling silver, traditional hand lathe turned, and then on the back, caliber P4, which is gorgeous. A manufacturer movement manual wind with a 3-day power reserve. It has hacking seconds, which is surprisingly rare on high horology independent brand watches, but it's also built durable with a full balance bridge and a free sprung balance. 3 Hz beat rate, again, 72-hour power reserve. Take a look at this sun ray, Côte de Genève, that radiates out from an imaginary center point atop the balance. We have both polished and fire-blued screws. You can see that the bevels are tremendous. Look at those mirrored bevels right there. And then take a look at how many interior angles you get. Real sharp interior angles. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a lot of Geneva Hallmark watches that don't have one interior angle. This has 4, and not all interior angles are created equal. These are broadly drawn back over the bridges, super sharp and well-defined. We even have one exterior angle where 2 bevels meet in a sharp point. That's also difficult to do. Then we have engine turning on the base plate, and they even skeletonized the bridge for the balance. A really cool watch from a brand recently purchased by Kari Voutilainen, who is reestablishing it as a flagship within his holding of companies. So this is not just a brand that's still around. This is a brand that's making a comeback under one of the great auteurs and business minds in independent horology today. And when this watch was made, they were only making a few hundred a year, so production was super constrained. A fine movement, a fine dial, a fine case, a fine watch. Beautifully executed, rare, special, from a brand that's really going places. I will never understand why Breguet doesn't get more love. I think it's because A, Swatch Group mismarkets it, and B, it's called Breguet. Imagine if you had a minor league baseball player. He comes up to the majors, he's highly touted, a high draft pick, 5-tool player. He's got everything. He has a conventionally great career, 200 home runs, 4 all-star berths, a couple of gold gloves, maybe a silver slugger. One of the good guys. A scout feels really good about drafting. But here's the problem. His name is Babe Ruth. Everything he accomplishes will fall short because he will be compared to an impossible standard. Not just a great player, the greatest player who ever played the game, who set every record. The subject of a legend. And that is what Abraham Louis Breguet is in the watch world. He's Babe Ruth. So the modern Breguet company, which has nothing to do with Breguet the man, makes some of the finest high horology watches in the business, using fire bluing, rose lathes, cold rolling and hand finishing of coined cases, welding of lugs, freehand engraving of spectacular, complicated tourbillon calibers. And yet people say, oh, well, this isn't the real Breguet. Of course it is. Are you telling me that Patek Philippe isn't the real Patek Philippe because no one related to those people is still involved? Or that Jaeger-LeCoultre is not one of the great houses in all of history because neither a Jaeger nor LeCoultre currently works there? Breguet artisans today are among the best in the business. And that's why watches like this Classique Tourbillon 3657 in platinum are some of the best pre-owned buys in luxury watches. You have a 1-minute tourbillon free-sprung with a Breguet overcoil, 55-hour power reserve with power reserve indicator. You have a little retrograding 24-hour AM/PM gauge for the time at center. So you know, for example, whether you're looking at 4 p.m. or 4 a.m., and it's clear that it is 4 a.m., just like that. You have a spectacular ricochet guilloche with a dental molding around the edge. The tourbillon bridge features both satination and mirror beveling. The tourbillon cage is full black polished. Flip it over, the movement is breathtaking. 6 position adjusted, one more than a chronometer. We have a florisant or a floral pattern. We have freehand engraving, including of the text. You can see volutes and spirals executed by eye-hand coordination without a lathe. This is all done with a burin, so no two exactly alike. They even give you a full platinum deployant clasp, and this watch is beautifully sized. At 39 millimeters, anyone can wear it. This is a real connoisseur's piece for people who know their stuff. If you don't need to have FP Journe on the dial, or Voutilanen on the dial, or Dufour on the dial, guess what? Some of the best work in high horology today is being done by mostly nameless and faceless artisans who make Breguet watches. What does Swatch Group need to do? I'll tell you what they need to do. They need to start promoting those people, building them up into personalities, figures of consequence in the industry. These are the people who make the best watches in the world today. No, they're not Breguet, but you know what they are? They're the best currently living. And last I checked, Abraham Louis Breguet died 200 years ago. Old news. If you're bidding on a vintage watch, good for you. But in the modern era, the people at this brand make some of the finest watches you could buy at any price. And because of depreciation, that price will be very reasonable. I didn't know which Breguet would end today, but this is the rarest of the Breguet watches I have in inventory. I've seen a few of the 3657s, but this right here, the Marine Tourbillon Chronograph 5837, this is the first one of these I've had in a while. 42 millimeters in diameter, the watch is red gold, 100 meters water resistant, and in spectacular fashion, it's even luminescent with the hands and the indices different colors. It's a real sports watch with a solid gold dial, by the way. These dials, solid gold. And it's been cut on a rose lathe to create this wonderful Nautilus shell pattern, which you can see again on the case back. You can see that the minder on the strap is also a wave pattern. You can see that wave pattern on the buckle, waves on the reverse of the case, waves on the underside of the strap. Rubber strap, swimmable watch. Wave motif for the chronograph pushers. We have chronograph seconds, minutes, and hours. We have a 1-minute tourbillon. We have applied rose gold Roman numerals. A little note that a million years ago, Breguet was the watchmaker to the French Navy. And you can see a 1-minute tourbillon with a titanium cage, a full silicone escapement, and an anti-magnetic silicone hairspring. It has a free-sprung recessed bolt aerodynamic balance up to the minute in technology. Flip it all over. The movement's spectacular. Also 6-position adjusted. It is a traditional column wheel, lateral clutch chronograph. We have rose gold gilded bridges and plates for the conventional time-telling functions, and then satinated and mirror-beveled steel parts for the chronograph. You can see vintage pocket watch-inspired wheel profiles for the chronograph train right there. Those spokes relate to pocket watch-era Breguet watches. And then, my God, how many interior angles? 1, 2, 3, 4. Turn it all over. Look at the underside of the tourbillon. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're super sharp. The bevels are well defined and the interior angles well creased. And of course we have recesses with internal beveling for all of the jewel sinks. 50-hour manual wind power reserve Lamagna chronograph tourbillon caliber. I believe this is the 5543, an unbelievable watch. You've heard of supercars. This is a super watch. It's only 14.2 millimeters thick, which means it's probably not as thick as you would have expected for something like this. What does a Lange Turbograph cost? Too much. This watch is going to be a lot more attainable. Again, reach out to me, Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase details. You can swim with this. You can wear it at night. It's got a practical complication. It has a beautiful refinement, and it has finish equal to the best in the business. I'm talking Patek, Vacheron, better than AP, and on par with Lange. And again, because Breguet is on the dial, it's held to an impossible standard. This watch is the gold standard, both the case and the dial, solid gold. Hold it up to the standards of the Holy Trinity, Lange, and the best independents, and a lot of them will wind up bloodied in comparison to this Breguet Marine Tourbillon chronograph. If you love this watch, reach out to me. I am Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details. Reach out to me for pricing.